Today, we're going to talk about something that's, well, it's tough, but it is so important. We're looking at the 7 signs of what's called a trauma bond. It's this intense connection that can feel so much like love, but it's often something way more complex and way more damaging. So let's get into it. Have you ever found yourself in that spot, or maybe watched a friend go through it, where you just can't seem to leave a partner who, well, who just doesn't treat you right? It's so confusing and frustrating, and it's almost impossible to explain to anyone, even yourself, why you stay. Well, here's a thought that might just change everything. What if that powerful feeling, that intense pull, what if it's not actually love? What if it's more like an addiction? An addiction to a really painful repeating cycle. This idea is right at the heart of what a trauma bond really is. Yeah, it can feel totally unbreakable, right? This feeling of connection is so intense that the very thought of leaving feels, well, physically painful, even when you know deep down that the relationship is hurting you. And that's the central paradox, isn't it? Feeling this incredibly deep attachment and this profound sense of loyalty to the very person who's the source of your pain. It's an experience that is just so confusing, and it can make you feel completely alone. So, what do we actually call this thing? Well, psychologists have a name for it. And sometimes just being able to put a name to an experience is the very first step toward understanding it. It's called a trauma bond. And what that means is it's a deep emotional attachment to an abuser. But here's the key. It's formed and made stronger by a repeating cycle of abuse that's followed by really intense positive reinforcement. That cycle is what actually rewires our brain's attachment system. This cycle, think of it as the engine that powers the whole thing. See, it isn't bad all the time, and that's what's so disorienting. First, there's an incident of abuse. That's followed by remorse and apologies, promises it'll never happen again. And then comes the honeymoon phase, this period of intense affection, or what some people call love bombing. But then, sure enough, the tension starts to build again, and you're right back at the beginning. This emotional roller coaster is exactly what makes the bond so incredibly powerful. It's not an exaggeration to say that you become chemically and emotionally addicted to the cycle itself. It's not an addiction to the abuse, of course not. It's an addiction to the intense relief and euphoria of that honeymoon phase. You find yourself actually craving the high that comes right after the low. Okay, so how can you recognize if this is happening to you or maybe to someone you really care about? Let's walk through 7 distinct warning signs. Hopefully, they can bring some clarity to a really confusing situation. The first sign, you constantly find yourself making excuses for your partner's behavior. You might hear yourself saying things like, oh, they're just stressed, or they didn't really mean it. You're not just defending them to your friends and family, you're defending them to yourself. Second is isolation. When your friends or your family start to raise those red flags, you might find yourself pushing them away instead of listening. And as your world gets smaller and smaller, the bond with the person causing the harm often just gets stronger. Third, you might just feel numb, emotionally detached. This is actually a coping mechanism. When that emotional roller coaster becomes too much to handle, your mind might start to shut down your feelings just so you can get through the day. Okay, so let's quickly recap where we're at. We have defending their behavior, becoming isolated from others, and feeling emotionally numb. Let's keep going. The fourth sign is feeling utterly, completely stuck. And this visual captures it perfectly. Every single time you try to leave, it feels like a giant elastic band just snaps you right back. That pull can feel irresistible. Fifth, you get intensely focused on the good times. You cling to the memories of that honeymoon phase for dear life, using those positive moments to justify or completely overlook all of the negative ones. You're essentially living for these brief moments of sunshine in a storm. The sixth sign is a really destructive one. Your sense of self-worth gets eroded. You start to value their approval way more than your own well-being. And over time, this can lead you to actually believe that you deserve the mistreatment. And the final sign, number 7, is a profound sense of loyalty to the very person who is hurting you. It defies all logic, but it's a key feature of a trauma bond. You feel this duty to protect them, even at your own expense. So why does this happen? It is not a sign of weakness. It's a really powerful psychological principle at work. Let's look at the psychology that drives this addictive cycle. This is the question that just haunts so many people, right? Why does this bond feel stronger than love, stronger than logic? stronger even than your own survival instinct? The answer is actually wired into our brains. The answer is something called intermittent reinforcement. Think about it like this. Predictable kindness, it feels nice, and it builds security. But intermittent reinforcement is unpredictable. The reward, the affection, the apology, the love bombing, it comes at random times. This is the exact same principle that makes slot machines so addictive. Your brain gets hooked on chasing that unpredictable reward, creating a powerful, anxious craving that is incredibly hard to ignore. Understanding this addictive cycle, it's not about placing blame. It's about gaining power through knowledge. And that is the absolute key to breaking free. This is probably the most important takeaway. Recognizing that you're in a trauma bond is not your fault. You didn't choose this. Understanding the psychological mechanics at play just lifts that heavy burden of self-blame and replaces it with clarity. Honestly, just being able to name what you're experiencing, to say, this is a trauma bond, this is intermittent reinforcement, that is the first and most powerful step toward dismantling it. It gives you a framework and a language to begin reclaiming your own life. So, I'll end with a question for you to reflect on. Now that you can see the pattern of a trauma bond for what it is, what does a consistently safe, respectful, and truly loving connection look like to you? Because knowing the difference, that's where the healing begins.